Today I will be talking about these. What are they? What do they represent? Are they a flag? No, I can tell you very few flags use brown, or very few countries use brown in their flags. Are they personality types? Nope. I'm the kind of personality type who doesn't allow myself to believe in personality types. You might have guessed they have something to do with politics, ideologies, visions for society. Or should I say divisions? Because right now we are perhaps more divided than ever, at least in my little lifetime. I study change in society by looking at consumption, which is a lot of fun. It's a privilege. Because consumption says something about what's encouraged, rewarded, and considered right in a society at a particular point in time. We could say that society is a reward system in that way, and it rewards the kind of consumption that feeds that particular system. We don't like to think about our consumption that way because we like to think of ourselves as very individual, independent people who do what we want and consume what we want. But as a consumer researcher, I can say that most of us, most of the time, consume according to some kind of market ideology. So what do these preach? What did they want? I'll put it in some historical context. You don't have to take this slide in, it's really, it's going to make you dizzy. But it's my personal little notes on how large versions of the economic system, capitalism, has changed over the last 100 years, and trickled down into various lifestyles and ways of consuming. And up in the right-hand corner, you can see the colors. And I call them the neo-blue, the neo-brown, and the neo-green and the neo-brown. They are parallel existences at this moment, and some of them are more or less fulfilled. And we'll start with the blue one. It starts in the 70s, kind of when I was born myself. And we may wonder what it envisions. Well, this was a vision of cash. Monetary values, which had to grow, and we had to compete for resources in order to get this growth. You could say it's a growth economy that way. And the typical way of measuring a nation's success would be through GMP, which is monetary activity. So it's quantitative, monetary, cash. And the archetypical politician of this kind of vision was, of course, anybody? Yeah, I was not sure about how many generations in here there were. But it's Ronald Reagan, the TV actor president, who was like the poster boy for free market, globalization, and minimal state. And the kind of consumption that was rewarded according to the system is, of course, newness, because that feeds that whole system. We need to consume new, and it needs to be urban. We need to move into the cities because it needs to be very concentrated. You're a huge loser if you don't move into the cities. If you stay in the village, it's not a good idea. So this is an urban grandiosity where everything was supposed to become larger, bigger, grander. And there's a narcissistic feel to it where we start to create a need for luxury and bling-bling in order to feel that we as anxious middle class are climbing the social echelons of the social pyramid upwards. And the typical consumer of this time in the 80s was, of course, the Wall Street yuppie, the investment banker. Whereas a little bit later, the epicenter would be from Silicon Valley, the typical brat, narcissistic, bling-bling, popping up champagne wherever he or she went. So this is, because I say is, because it's not gone or anything, something that we all aspired for at this time, maybe. So in Sweden, for example, we consume 26 tons of oysters. 26 tons. I think that's a lot. But hold your horses, because just a few years later, we consumed 360 tons. We all wanted to be upper class. We kind of bought this whole concept that we can become something more than we are. So this is a consumption paradise, a Disneyland for grown-ups. And of course it got critiqued by a lot of social critics. And it came from what I call the NeoGreen direction. In 2006, Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth became a tipping point for this movement. It was about mobilizing institutions, consumers, markets, and politicians around the mantra of sustainability. I call it the NeoGreen because it was very different from the old green in the 60s and 70s, which was an anti-capitalist movement. This, however, is a capitalist, mainstream capitalist movement. Yet, it has urged to have social value instead of monetary value, a more holistic view. It has a vision of creating equality by, for example, not measuring national success just through quantitative money, GMP, but also how is that money, wealth, and income distributed in a nation. So equality is important, and of course sharing resources. We hear that a lot. The sharing of resources in order to make them last. Because that was what the neo-blue economy was critiqued for. It exploited the earth and was very destructive to the climate, according to critics. And of course, Barack Obama would be the typical politician representing this kind of vision. The consumption rewarded in here was, of course, authenticity, very different from newness and bling-bling, because it's all green, it's about small scale, locally produced, recycling, and the access base is there to fulfill the shared, so that we don't waste too much and so that it goes back into the system. And you might guess who are the archetypical consumers here, of course, the hipster and the Swedish dad, a global concept nowadays. They are both kind of playing with masculinity and femininity in different kinds of ways, where I believe that the absurd amount of face hair that comes with hipsters is there to kind of compensate for the more feminine values that this kind of movement is normally said to have. So this is when we start sipping natural wines and lambic beers. We become vegans, flexitarians, and we bike on our fixed gear bikes. If we want to use cars, we use them as bars. We move out in the countryside. We really like the countryside now. And everything has to be small scale. Micro beers, micro everything. But while we're sitting there sipping, there are critics also regarding this. Critics who are saying that this is too much of a superficial movement. We have only switched the blue content with green. It's a neo-blue system in disguise. So the same key figures are used to measure success. It's the same monetary share value that are being rewarded. It is the same globalization. It's the same exploding, widening of gaps between the super rich and the rest. And also, there is an ignorance, critics say, both from the blue and from the green, about that growing resentment and unease among the precarious, unemployed ex-working classes. So the content was switched from blue to green, but the system was intact. The neo-green simply cuddled too much with the neo-blue. And if you cuddle with the blue with the green, if you mix them, you might remember when you were a child, it becomes suspiciously brown. So here we are. And the Silicon Valley dropouts, they are becoming more and more, are calling the root of the neo-blue, maybe, the dopamine economy. Dopamine economy has has encouraged many kinds of ideologies and visions, but it's the neo-brown that has risen and thrived the most out of it. So without the dopamine economy, we would not have seen this in this force. And what is the dopamine economy? It's about selling information that we give to companies, to online services that have been created because we paid so much engagement and attention to them. So it's here the value is not monetary, it's not social, it's to get attention so that we get engaged, give information about ourselves, and that's the sellable product. But in order for us to do that, you need conflict. It's conflict triggering this whole economy. So I call it a conflict economy. I think it sounds too good with a dopamine economy. And you guess it, of course, the archetypical politician here is, of course, Donald Trump, the ever-tweeting one. And the kind of consumption that is rewarding this system, you could say, it's feeding this system, is consumption of nostalgia, escape, and survivalism. Nostalgia is different from authenticity, because you might think that's the same, but nostalgia doesn't embrace any kind of future development. It basically wants to go backwards and wants to stay there. Escape, on the other hand, wants to go into the most obscure interests that we cannot really understand, and they also become very fragmented in society. And survivalism is exactly what it sounds like. It's about some kind of defensive consumption to be able to survive. That's the goal. And the typical consumers embodying this are, of course, the trolls or the preppers preparing for the doomsday. And on the other side of the economic scale, you will have the filthy rich who make money out of climate-unfriendly businesses. This is a very interesting consumer culture to me as a researcher. People do the weirdest things. Instead of buying summer houses or dreaming of them, you invest your money in a bunker, for example. So this is a huge industry, survivalism, and this whole defensive consumption. So you buy a bunker and you make sure that you get the kind of floor plan that you want so that you can really live in there when the aliens come and when the nuclear war happens. And these huge industries, they are directed towards all kinds of consumers. And to the super, super rich, you can go to the Survival Condo project in Kansas and not South Dakota, as on the other picture. Here you get safety guards and they're armed. You have swimming pools inside, hospitals, dental chairs, and of course shooting ranges, because you need that. Of course. Or if you're even more rich, you go to March. I mean, there are many people planning to go to March as we speak. And because, of course, it's nice there. And brown, I've heard. But why are we so prone to this conflict in this kind of economy we're now? Dopamine digitality does something to us. The South Korean philosopher Han talks about swarms. Because of the conflict triggering mechanisms of these algorithmic rewards that we get in dopamine economy online, we move in swarms upon every little touch on conflict. We all become fish in this kind of economy. Those fish creates shitstorms, as he called it. That's his word, shitstorms. It fits very well here because shitstorms are brown and they're very hard to clean up. So in this dopamine economy, we all become fish. And what if we don't want to become fish? What should we do? Well, more and more people, and I see this because I'm a consumer researcher, they actually lean upon consumption. They become political consumers. The increase of political consumerism is quite radical every year at this point in time, since the 90s. I would say that's not the best idea. Consumption is powerful, it's performative, it inspires, it symbolizes things, but it feeds already existing systems most of the time. It's very tempting to love the companies that are speaking the messages you like. But marketeers and companies are maybe not the ones who should be politicians. I'm one of those who believe that real change for society needs to be through the system itself. And then we need to get some dirt under our nails. We need to become politicians ourselves. I'm not the first one to say this. I'm certainly not the last, but it's worth repeating. We need to be activists, all of us, join parties or create parties, speak to politicians, see politics as something which is something cool and something we need to do. We need some smart people doing politics, not just reality soap actors. And remember, blue and green can both individually be mixed and turned into bright. But brown will never go bright again, and certainly not truly green. Thank you.